He won. That was the only thought in his head. Marcus Thorne, a man who saw the world as a game of winners and losers, had just secured his title. He'd walked out of that courtroom with everything, the house, the portfolio, the victory. He left his ex-wife Elena with nothing but her maiden name and a check he considered a charitable donation. As he adjusted his $5,000 tie, a smug smirk played on his lips. He was free. He was rich. He was a winner. But the funny thing about winning is that you have to make sure you're playing the right game. The sterile, fluorescent light of the Los Angeles County Courthouse hallway was unkind. It highlighted the weariness etched around Elena Hayes's eyes and the faint tremor in her hands as she clutched a worn leather briefcase. Across from her, a scene of quiet triumph was unfolding. Marcus Thorne, her husband of 12 years, now officially ex-husband, was laughing. It was a low, confident chuckle shared with his lawyer, a man aptly named Roger Harding, whose face looked like it had been carved from polished, unforgiving granite. "A clean break, Marcus," Harding was saying, clapping his client on the shoulder. "Cleaner than most." "It's what we paid for, isn't it, Roger?" Marcus replied. His voice, that smooth baritone that had once charmed venture capitalists and silenced boardrooms, was slick with satisfaction. He was a man built by high-end tailors and his own ruthless ambition. Today, he wore a custom Zegna suit dark as a shark's eye. He looked like he was closing a billion-dollar deal, not ending a marriage. To him, perhaps they were the same. The judge had hammered the gavel down just 10 minutes prior. The ruling was brutal. The prenuptial agreement signed by a 25-year-old Elena who was dizzy in love and blind to the fine print was upheld. Ironclad Harding had called it. Marcus retained 100% of his company, Thorne Capital. He retained the Pacific Palisades mansion, the one Elena had spent 3 years designing with architect Ken Lin. He retained the art collection, her art collection, the one she had painstakingly curated, which he had always called her little hobby. Elena Hayes, formerly Thorne, walked away with a one-time lump sum payout. It was a staggering amount to an average person, but compared to the empire she had helped build, it was an insult. It was, as Marcus had so crudely put it during depositions, severance. Elena's lawyer, Sarah Jenkins, a sharp-eyed woman who seemed to be vibrating with a suppressed fury, placed a hand on her arm. "Elena, it's over. Let's go." "Just a moment," Elena whispered. Her voice was hoarse. Marcus saw them. The show wasn't over. He straightened his silk tie, the smirk finding its full, arrogant bloom. He strode over his Italian leather shoes, clicking an expensive, lonely rhythm on the polished floor. He stopped a foot in front of her. He was taller, broader, a physical eclipse. "Elena," he said, his tone dripping with a grotesque faux pity, "I want you to know this was business, nothing personal." Elena's gaze lifted. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, were dry. She had run out of tears weeks ago. "Was it business, Marcus? Or was it a game?" He chuckled, that same self-satisfied sound. "In my world, sweetheart, they're the same thing, and you always have to play to win." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a slim silver card holder. He extracted a business card. Marcus Thorne, CEO and founder, Thorne Capital. "If you know," he gestured vaguely. "If you ever find yourself in a real jam, my new assistant Candy can probably find a spot for you. Reception, maybe." It was the final twisting of the knife. The implication that she, a woman with a dual master's in art history and business from Yale, was fit only for answering his phones. Elena didn't take the card. She just looked at his hand until he almost awkwardly let it drop to his side. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. "Good luck, Elena," he said, the smirk returning wider than ever. He turned to leave. "Try not to, just good luck." He patted her shoulder as he passed. A gesture of ownership, of dismissal. Elena didn't flinch. She just watched him walk away. She watched as he and Harding got into the elevator, his laughter echoing in the sterile hall. She watched the polished steel doors slide shut sealing her past away. "He thinks he won." Sarah, her lawyer, said, her voice tight. "Yes." Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady, though it felt like it was coming from a great distance. "He does." She took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was filtered through razor blades. She turned to Sarah, a flicker of something new, something cold and hard igniting in her eyes. "Is it done?" Elena asked. Sarah Jenkins checked her phone. A single new text message. She smiled. It was not a nice smile. "The asset freeze is complete," Sarah said. "The SEC just filed the motion. Project Lyra is officially grounded." Elena nodded, a single sharp movement. "Good. Let's go." As they walked towards the exit, Elena finally allowed herself a small secret smile. Marcus was right. It was a game. He had just been playing the wrong one. The marriage hadn't started with a prenup. It had started with a painting. Elena Hayes was 24, the youngest ever guest curator at the Getty, giving a lecture on the provenance of Dutch masters. He was Marcus Thorne, 30, a junior partner at a small venture capital firm, and he was bored. He'd been dragged there by a potential investor, Arthur Pennington, an old money fossil who cared more for art than algorithms. Marcus was about to fake a phone call when he heard her speak. It wasn't just her voice, though. It was lovely, clear, and confident. It was the way she spoke. She wasn't just describing the art. She was telling its story. She wove a narrative of secret patrons, stolen canvases, and the chemical composition of a specific long-lost blue pigment. That night, Arthur Pennington, utterly charmed, pledged $5 million to Marcus's new fund. Marcus didn't see the art. He saw the tool. He pursued her with the same single-minded focus he applied to a hostile takeover. Elena, a romantic intellectual, was swept away. He was charismatic, brilliant, and he seemed to see her. He praised her mind, not just her beauty. He told her she was his secret weapon. "You, Lena," he'd murmur, kissing her temple after a successful dinner party. "You speak their language. I just speak money. You speak legacy." She fell for it. She married him. She signed the prenup without a lawyer of her own. "It's just a formality, baby," he'd said, brushing her hair from her face. "A just in case. The partners insist." The first 5 years were a blur of ambition. Elena put her PhD on hold. Then she put her career on hold. Her new job, as Marcus called it, was him. She was the perfect hostess. She knew which wine to serve the Vandermeer family, what topic to avoid with the Japanese tech mogul, and exactly which obscure 18th century sculpture to place in the sightline of a difficult investor. She built their social world. She cultivated the connections. She turned Marcus Thorne, a smart but rough-edged hustler, into Mr. Marcus Thorne, a polished, formidable player. The house in the Palisades was her project. He gave her an unlimited budget, his first grand gesture of trust. She poured her soul into it, creating a space that was both a home and a masterpiece of modern design. It became the place to be. A party at the Thorne residence was a guaranteed entry into the social pages. And Marcus's star rose. Thorne Capital became a powerhouse. The first crack appeared not with a bang, but with a password. Elena was handling their shared calendar, another of her wifely duties, when she saw an entry, Project Lyra, final. It was on a Saturday. She was supposed to be in New York for a gallery opening. He'd told her he had a board retreat. Curious, she tried to open the attached file. It was password protected. She tried the usual, their anniversary, his birthday, password 1223. Nothing. On a whim, she typed in the name of his first ever successful stock flip, a name he'd told her in their early wine-soaked nights of sharing secrets. Icarus. The file opened. It wasn't a board retreat. It was a network of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and wire transfers. It was vast. And at the center of it was Project Lyra, a deal she recognized. It was a deal she had helped him land. It was the deal with the Vandermeer family, a green tech initiative she had personally pitched to the matriarch Beatrix Vandermeer over tea, and a discussion of 17th century tulip cultivation. Marcus had told her the deal fell through. A total loss, he'd lamented before taking her to Cabo to get over the disappointment. But here it was. Not a loss, but a massive secret success. He had not only closed the deal, but he had structured it to bypass Thorn Capital's main accounts and therefore their marital assets. He had hidden $80 million. She scrolled deeper, her blood turning to ice. She saw transfers to other accounts. One in particular had a recurring payment. A condo in Miami. A car lease. The name on the transfer authorization was C. Alvarez. Candy. Elena closed the laptop. The click of the lid was deafening in the silent glass-walled office that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. The house she had built suddenly felt like a mausoleum. She wasn't his partner. She wasn't his secret weapon. She was just his first investor, the one he was planning to cut loose. For 6 months, she played the part. She was the perfect, oblivious wife. She smiled at the parties. She approved flower arrangements. She ignored the late-night meetings and the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suits. Inside, she was a different person. She was a forensic investigator. Every night after he fell asleep, a deep, dreamless slumber of the self-assured, she would go to her office. She memorized account numbers. She photographed documents with a burner phone. She traced the labyrinth of his deceit from the Cayman Islands to Delaware to a small, unassuming bank in Zurich. She learned his real business, the fraud, the tax evasion, the way he was systematically draining the company to build a new life, one that didn't include her. She knew that if she confronted him, he would destroy her. He would use the ironclad prenup, his army of lawyers, and her emotional instability to leave her with nothing. So she didn't confront him. She prepared. She needed a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. She couldn't walk into a top-tier LA firm. Marcus had half of them on retainer. She needed someone he would never see coming. She started looking for her own secret weapon. And in her research, scrolling through obscure legal journals, she found a name. A fixer, known in elite circles, a ghost who specialized in impossible divorces. The problem was this lawyer was unreachable. Unless Elena remembered a name from her past, a reclusive, eccentric collector she had briefly corresponded with years ago about a rare painting. He was known for his unusual connections. He was also known to despise men like Marcus Thorn. She dug out the old monogrammed stationery. She picked up her favorite fountain pen. It was a long shot, a desperate wild pass. She wrote a letter, not asking for help but offering a story. A story about a JMW Turner painting a fraudulent financier and a wife who had finally learned to see the true pigment. She sent the letter via private courier to an unlisted address in Switzerland. 2 weeks later, a new encrypted phone appeared on her doorstep. No note, no card. She turned it on. There was one number in the contacts saved under a single ominous letter B. She pressed call. A voice answered. It was quiet, cultured, and carried the weight of old-world power. "Mrs. Thorne," the voice said without preamble. "Or perhaps I should say Ms. Hayes. I received your letter. I must say your analysis of the slave ship was insightful. Tell me more about the man who thinks he can paint over a masterpiece." His name was Julian Alistair Blackwood, and he was about to change the game. Marcus Thorne was in a magnificent mood. He left the courthouse, tossed his briefcase onto the passenger seat of his Aston Martin DB11, and peeled out of the parking garage. The judge's words echoed in his head. The court finds in favor of Mr. Thorne. He won. He'd kept his house. He'd kept his money. He'd swatted Elena away like a fly. He blasted Frank Sinatra. I did it. My way. He hit the speed dial for Candy. "Hey, baby," he crooned, merging onto the Pacific Coast Highway. "Guess who's officially a free man?" "Ooh, really, baby?" Candy's voice was breathy and high. "Does that mean we can finally go public? I've been dying to post that pic from Cabo." "Post away, sweetheart," Marcus laughed. And book a table at Spago, the best one. We're celebrating. I just closed the deal of a lifetime." He hung up, feeling the sun on his face. He was invincible. Instead of heading straight home to the Palisades, he took a detour. He drove toward the Marina del Rey. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he just wanted to look at the water. Maybe subconsciously he wanted to drive by the small slip where his boat, a modest 40-foot Sea Ray, was docked, the boat Elena had always called his toy. He passed the main channel where the serious boats were, and then he saw it. It wasn't a boat. It was a floating fortress. It was a 350-foot super yacht, a sleek, menacing blade of obsidian and chrome. It was parked in the private deep-water dock usually reserved for visiting royalty or tech demigods. It was the Astria. Marcus knew the Astria. Everyone in his world knew it. It was a ghost ship, a legend. It belonged to the most reclusive and terrifying man in global finance, Julian Alistair Blackwood. Blackwood wasn't just rich. Rich was what Marcus was. Blackwood was powerful. He didn't just own companies, he owned industries. Shipping rare earth minerals, AI development. He was old money aristocracy mixed with new money ruthlessness. He was rumored to move markets with a single encrypted email. He was, in a word, a god. An unseen, vengeful god. Marcus slowed the Aston Martin, his Sinatra forgotten. He stared, impressed and slightly jealous. What was Blackwood doing in L.A.? He was about to drive on when he saw movement on the aft deck. A gangway impossibly sleek had been extended to the private dock. A woman was stepping off. She was wearing a simple white linen sundress. Her honey blonde hair was pulled back in a loose, artless ponytail. She was barefoot. She looked young, lighter. She turned and laughed, a sound that carried across the water clear as a bell. It was a laugh Marcus hadn't heard in a decade. His foot slammed on the brake. The Aston Martin fishtailed slightly. It was Elena, but it wasn't his Elena. Not the worn-out, defeated woman in the drab gray suit he had just decimated in court. This Elena was radiant. She was glowing. She stepped onto the dock. A man's hand reached out to steady her. Not a crew member in a uniform. A man in a dark, custom-made polo shirt and white trousers. The man stepped out from the yacht's shadow into the full golden glare of the California sun. Marcus went cold. His blood felt like it had been replaced with ice water. It was Julian Alistair Blackwood. He wasn't what Marcus had expected. He wasn't old. He was perhaps 50, with sharp aristocratic features, silvering hair at the temples, and the most arresting, intelligent eyes Marcus had ever seen. He wasn't smiling, but his gaze on Elena was intimate, possessive. He said something, and Elena laughed again, leaning her head against his shoulder for a brief, familiar moment. Blackwood then looked up directly at the road. Directly at the flashy, conspicuous Aston Martin stopped dead in the middle of it. He didn't know Marcus. He couldn't. But his eyes, cold gray and utterly devoid of emotion, seemed to scan him, assess him, and dismiss him in a single chilling instant. Then Julian Alistair Blackwood did something that stopped Marcus's heart. He smiled. It was a small, thin, cold smile, and it was aimed right at Marcus. It was the smile of a predator that has just spotted its prey. Elena turned, following his gaze. She saw the Aston Martin. She saw Marcus, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror silhouetted behind the glass. Her laugh died. Her expression didn't change. She didn't look sad. She didn't look angry. She didn't look anything. She simply held his gaze. Then, in a gesture of ultimate devastating dismissal, she turned her back on him. She took Blackwood's offered arm, and together they walked up the dock toward a waiting, unmarked black Bentley. Marcus sat there, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The silence in the car was absolute. The Sinatra song had ended. His phone buzzed. A text from Candy. Spago at 8:03. 3. 3. Marcus didn't see it. All he could see was Elena, his mousy, defeated, cast-off wife, walking away with a man who could buy and sell Marcus Thorne before breakfast. The smirk he'd worn out of the courthouse felt like a grotesque painted-on grimace. It was gone. In its place was a new, unfamiliar sensation. It was fear. "What?" he whispered to the empty car. "What the hell is going on?" The Palisades mansion had never felt so cold. Marcus stood in the center of the vast, minimalist living room the one Architectural Digest had featured. The floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooked a black, glittering expanse of the Pacific. The house he had won. He had a glass of 30-year-old Macallan in his hand. It tasted like ash. He was replaying the scene at the marina over and over. Elena, Blackwood, the Astria, the smile. His first thought: she was sleeping with him. It was the only way it made sense. His plain, bookish Elena had somehow impossibly landed the biggest whale on the planet. He felt a flash of, not jealousy, but offense. She was his. How dare she? But that didn't add up. The Julian Blackwood he'd heard about didn't do scandals. He didn't dally with newly divorced wives of second-rate financiers. He grabbed his phone and called Roger Harding, his lawyer. "Marcus, you should be celebrating." Harding's voice boomed. "Shut up and listen," Marcus snapped. "Who is Elena's lawyer, the new one? Sarah Jenkins." "Jenkins, I told you she's a junior league shark. Out of her depth. Why?" "She's not. I'm running her name. She's a ghost. No online presence, no firm website. Where did she come from?" "Marcus, you won. It doesn't matter." "It matters," Marcus roared. "And one more thing. I want you to find out what Julian Alistair Blackwood is doing in Los Angeles." There was a dead silence on the line. "Blackwood." Harding's voice was suddenly 2 octaves higher. "The Astria Blackwood." "Yes, that Blackwood. He's here. And I think he's with Elena." The silence that followed was so profound Marcus thought the call had dropped. "Roger." "Marcus." Harding said, his voice now a strained, sober whisper. "You need to be very, very careful. Do not call me again on this line. Do not call him. Do not do anything." The call clicked off. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Marcus's chest. He poured another whiskey. He did what he always did when he was in trouble. He called his private investigator, a former Mossad agent named Ari, who specialized in corporate espionage. "Ari, I need you on Julian Blackwood and my ex-wife, Elena Hayes." "Blackwood?" Ari's voice was flat. "That will be expensive." "I don't care what it costs," Marcus snarled. "I want to know where they met, what they're doing, and where she's sleeping. I want it by morning." Marcus didn't sleep. He paced the cold marble floors of his house, the whiskey doing nothing to dull the sharp edges of his anxiety. At 4:17 a.m. his encrypted phone buzzed. A file from Ari. It wasn't a long report. It was a single paragraph and 3 attachments. Subject: Hayes Elena. Re Blackwood J.A. No confirmed romantic link. Subject has been residing for 94 days at the Continuum, a private, unlisted penthouse property in Century City. Property is owned by Alistair Holdings, a Blackwood shell corp. Subject's legal counsel, Sarah A. Jenkins, is not a divorce attorney. She is the lead counsel for Blackwood's North American Acquisitions and Risk Division. Her personal firm, Jenkins & Associates, is a known Blackwood subsidiary specializing in forensic accounting and reputational cleansing. Attachments: 1. SEC flag request 774 B PDF. 2. IRS subpoena international wire transfer 8938. PDF. 3. File La Thorne Capital Project Lyra. Whistleblower. Zip. Marcus's hands were shaking so hard he almost dropped the phone. 94 days. Elena had been in a Blackwood-owned property for 3 months, before she even filed for divorce. Sarah Jenkins, Forensic Accounting. He clicked on the third attachment. Whistleblower. Zip. He entered his password. The file opened. It was his file. The one from his laptop. The Icarus file. It was every offshore account. Every illegal transfer. Every lie. It was a complete itemized and perfectly documented record of his fraud. He stared, his vision tunneling. The court case. The argument over the house. The insulting payout. It was all a distraction. It was a show. A puppet show designed to keep him busy, to make him look at the marital assets while she wasn't trying to win the divorce. She was trying to lose it. She had to prove she had no financial stake, no motive, to establish herself as a disgruntled party, not a co-conspirator. He thought back to the courtroom. Elena's defeated slump. Her lawyer's fury. It was theater. It was all a goddamn performance. He had walked into that courtroom thinking he was the lion. He was the lamb. He was being led to the slaughter. He stammered, sinking into a $50,000 Eames chair. She gave him the house. She let him win the art. She let him keep his company, because she knew. She knew that the house was about to be seized as an asset bought with laundered money. She knew the art collection would be impounded. And she knew that Thorn Capital, his entire empire, was a house of cards that she had just handed gift-wrapped to the IRS and the SEC. The phone rang. It was his main office line diverting to his cell. It was 4:30 a.m. "Hello," he whispered. "Mr. Thorne?" The voice was brisk, official. "This is Agent Davies from the Securities and Exchange Commission, Los Angeles Field Office. We are calling to inform you that a freeze has been placed on all assets related to Thorn Capital and its subsidiaries pending a federal investigation into... Well, the list is quite long. We'd like you to be at our office at 8 a.m. sharp. And, sir, you should probably bring a lawyer, a criminal lawyer." Marcus Thorne let the phone slip from his numb fingers. It clattered onto the marble floor, the agent's voice still tinny and distant. He looked out the window. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in sickening shades of pink and orange. He hadn't been swindled. He hadn't been outplayed. He had been hunted. And the smirk he saw at the Marina Blackwood's cold, thin smile wasn't a hello. It was a checkmate. The bottom had fallen out 6 months ago. After Elena discovered the Icarus file, she spent a week in a fog of pure, undiluted despair. She was trapped. She was a bird in a gilded cage, and the door had just been welded shut. If she left him, the prenup would leave her destitute. If she stayed, she was a silent partner to a criminal. If she exposed him, he would drag her down with him. He'd claim she was complicit, that her hobby of curating their art collection was in fact money laundering. He was smart enough to have implicated her even passively. She was trapped. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She disappeared into the art. There was a small private gallery in Culver City that was showing a piece on loan, JMW Turner's Slave Ship Slavers Throwing Overboard the Dead and Dying. Elena had written her graduate thesis on it. She stood before the chaotic, violent, and terrifyingly beautiful canvas for almost an hour. It was a painting about a horrific, inhuman crime, the captain of a slave ship throwing the sick and dying overboard to collect insurance money. A crime of profit. It was a masterpiece of hidden brutality. The sublime, fiery sunset almost completely masked the drowning hands and monstrous fish in the foreground. It was, she thought, a perfect portrait of her husband. He saw the beauty, but also the balance sheet, a quiet voice said beside her. Elena started. She hadn't realized anyone else was there. The man was standing just behind her shoulder. He was impeccably dressed, but his clothes were understated. He had the kind of face that wasn't handsome but compelling. His eyes, a pale, watchful gray, were fixed on the canvas. "The insurance claim," Elena whispered, her voice rusty. "The Zong massacre. He painted the invoice. The man turned his head and his gaze was electric. Very few people see that. They see a sunset. You see the fraud. It's hard to miss, Elena said, if you know what you're looking for. He looked at her, really looked at her with an intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in years. I am Julian Blackwood, he said, offering a hand. I own the gallery and this painting. Elena Hayes, she said, deliberately dropping the thorn. They didn't speak again for 10 minutes. They just looked at the painting. You're the woman who wrote the letter on Dutch pigment, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I am, she said. And you are the wife of Marcus Thorne, the man who leveraged his wife's connection to the Van der Meer family and then hid the profits in a shell company named Project Lyra. Elena's heart stopped. She turned to face him, her body rigid with shock and fear. How do you... Beatrix Van der Meer is my godmother, Blackwood said simply, his eyes never leaving the painting. She was displeased to learn her green tech investment was being used to fund a condo in Miami. She asked me to look into it, and my investigation led me to Mr. Thorne. And to you. He turned to her. The letter you wrote me. It wasn't about pigment, was it, Ms. Hayes? It was a flare. You were testing the waters, seeing if I was an ally. Elena was silent. You are in a very dangerous position, Blackwood said. Your husband is not just an adulterer. He is a high-level fraudster, and he has made you a party to it. The art you've been collecting, he's been buying it with laundered funds, using your expertise as a cover. When he falls, he will make sure he lands on you. Elena's legs gave out. She reached for a nearby bench, sinking onto it. What can I do? Right now, nothing, he said. If you divorce him, he'll crush you. He'll use the prenup and you'll have nothing to fight him with. If you report him, he'll claim you were his partner and you'll go to prison with him. He has built a perfect trap. So that's it, she said, the despair she'd been holding back finally cracking her voice. I'm done. Blackwood sat beside her. He was still a creature of immense contained energy. There is, he said, a third option. He looked at her. You let him destroy you. I don't understand. You file for divorce. You hire an average lawyer. You fight him on the marital assets, the house, the art, the bank accounts. You make him believe he is in a fight for his money. This will occupy his lawyers. It will occupy him. He is arrogant. He will be so focused on winning the divorce he won't see what's happening to his business. What is happening to his business? While he is in court fighting you over a sofa, Blackwood said, my team will be conducting a full forensic audit. We will take the information you've gathered, your Icarus file, and we will build a case, a criminal case. We will deliver it anonymously to the SEC and the IRS. Elena stared at him. You want me to lose. I want you to play the long game. Let him win the house. Let him keep his company. Let him smirk his way out of that courthouse. Because the moment the gavel falls, the real case begins. By the time he walks out victorious, his assets will be frozen, his boat will be seized, and his house will be a crime scene. He paused. This will be difficult. You will have to be the wronged wife. You will be publicly humiliated. He will paint you as a gold digger, then as a failure. You will have to take it. You will have to lose. Elena looked back at the Turner, the drowning hands hidden in the beautiful, chaotic waves. And you, she asked, why are you doing this? For your godmother. Blackwood's face hardened just slightly. Let's just say, I have a deep, abiding distaste for men who build empires on the backs of others, and I have an even deeper respect for masterpieces that have been undervalued. He stood up. I will provide you with a lawyer. Her name is Sarah Jenkins. She will be your underdog counsel. I will also provide you with a safe, secure place to live while this is happening. You will leave his house tonight. And when it's over, Blackwood said, his win will be worthless, and you will be free. He handed her a simple black business card. It had only a phone number. Ms. Jenkins is waiting. The choice, Ms. Hayes, is yours. Elena looked at the card. She looked at the painting. She thought of Marcus's smirk. She stood up. He can't just paint over the crime. He can't. No, Blackwood agreed. He can't. Where do I start? Elena asked. A small, satisfied smile touched Blackwood's lips. You already have. The next 3 months were the hardest of Elena's life, but they were also the most focused. She lived in the Continuum penthouse, a place that existed outside the normal geography of Los Angeles. It was a sterile, silent apartment in the sky, all glass and shadow, with a view that stretched from the San Gabriel Mountains to the pale, indifferent Pacific. It was a fortress provided by Blackwood, and its security was absolute. But it was also a prison. Elena spent her days in a state of suspended animation. She ate, she slept, she read, but she was not living. She was tempering. The woman who had left the courthouse shattered and betrayed was being burned away. In her place, a new woman was being forged, one made of cold tungsten resolve. Her only visitor was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was not a junior league shark. That was a carefully constructed fiction, a digital ghost. The real Sarah Jenkins was Julian Blackwood's most lethal legal weapon. She was a woman who saw the law not as a set of rules, but as a weapon system. Their meetings were not therapy sessions. They were strategy meetings. The war room. The Icarus file is good, Sarah said on their first day, her pen tapping a rhythm on a legal pad. They were in the penthouse's vast empty living room. It's a confession, but it's an unsigned confession. It's his private ledger, his fantasy. To make this stick, we need to tie it irrefutably to the corporate server. We need to prove the work was criminal, not just the fantasy. The air-gapped server, Elena said, her voice flat. She had learned of it by accident, a passing comment Marcus had made about true security. Exactly, Sarah said, her eyes sharp. He's smart. He keeps his personal fraud Icarus on his laptop. He keeps his corporate fraud Lyra on his office desktop, which is air-gapped from the main network. We need to bridge that gap. We need the server logs, the real ones. Elena's blood chilled. How? He's the only one with access. It's behind a biometric scanner, and his office is... It's his domain. You're still his wife, Sarah said, as if she were pointing out the sky was blue. For now, you still have a right to your personal property. You're going to go collect your things. He'll never let me in the office, Elena breathed. He'll be there. He'll want to watch me. I know, Sarah said. You will play the part you have been rehearsing your entire marriage, the dutiful, emotional, and slightly dim wife. He is arrogant. He wants to see you cry. He'll be so focused on his own sadistic enjoyment that he won't be looking at your hands. Sarah placed a small matte black object on the table. It looked like a standard USB drive. This is not a normal USB. It's a high-speed data siphon custom-built by Mr. Blackwood's tech division. It doesn't copy, it clones. You'll plug it into the back of his desktop tower. You will have max 30 seconds. A red light will blink while it's cloning. When the light turns green, you pull it out. But you must get him away from that desk. I don't think I can, Elena whispered, the old fear returning. Sarah's gaze hardened. Yes, you can. Because this isn't just about his money, Elena. This is about your life. He implicated you. The only way out is to be the person who burns the whole thing down. You are not a victim here. You are the whistleblower. That is the narrative we are creating. It's the only one that keeps you out of a matching orange jumpsuit. So Elena did it. She arranged the call, her voice trembling, which wasn't hard to fake. She was collecting her personal effects. Marcus was there, as Sarah predicted. He was standing in his office by the glass wall, a whiskey in his hand. The afternoon sun hit his Zegna suit. He looked like a king and he knew it. Taking he gestured with a sneer at the empty cardboard boxes she'd brought. The books make sense. Not much else you're qualified for. Better brush up on that resume. I hear reception is a tough field to break into. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. Breathe. Play the part. You are weak. You are broken. She moved to the bookshelf, pulling out her art history volumes. Her hands were shaking. Don't even think about touching the art. He warned, his voice a low growl. The prenup's clear. All my assets. Your little hobby ends today. This was it. She needed a distraction. She let a single calculated tear roll down her cheek. Marcus, she said, her voice a perfect broken whisper. The painting. The small one. The one from our honeymoon in Venice. He frowned. Which one, the gaudy one? The watercolor, she choked out. From the balcony at the Gritty Palace. It's the only thing I want. Please. He stared at her, his face contorted not with pity but with a smug, profound satisfaction. She was begging. For a memory. It was perfect. He had won everything. Fine. He sighed, rolling his eyes with exaggerated annoyance. God, you're pathetic. It's in the safe. He turned his back to her. He walked to the large steel safe hidden behind a minimalist panel. Elena's heart was a hammer in her chest. Now. She heard the quiet beep of the keypad. She moved. Her purse containing the data siphon was on his desk. In 3 seconds, 3 heart-pounding, adrenaline-fueled seconds, she was behind the desk. Her hand fumbled for the USB port on the back of the desktop tower. Click. It was in. A small red light blinked. Once. Twice. Heh. Can't even remember the combo. Marcus muttered, his back still to her. Ah. 10/22/08. Their anniversary. The cruelty was almost poetic. Elena's eyes were locked on the blinking red light. Turn. Turn green. Please God, turn green. Thunk. The heavy thunk of the safe door opening. Blink. Red. Marcus huffed, rummaging inside. Blink. Red. Blink. Green. Here, he said, turning around. Elena's hand, moving faster than thought, yanked the drive. She shoved it deep into her purse just as she fumbled for a tissue, her body collapsing in a sob. Marcus didn't notice. He tossed the small framed watercolor onto a box of books. The glass cracked. Happy, he snarled. Thank you, she choked out. It was the truest thing she had said to him in years. She grabbed her boxes and fled. She didn't stop shaking until she was back in the penthouse, the data siphon clutched in her hand like a hot coal. She gave the drive to Sarah, who plugged it into a secure, encrypted laptop. A moment of silence as the files loaded. Sarah didn't smile, but her eyes, when she looked up, were alight. It's all here, she said. The Rosetta Stone. The final bridge. He's done. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait. For the next 2 months they played divorce. It was a magnificent circus. Sarah Jenkins, on Blackwood's orders, was a brilliant B-movie lawyer. She filed frivolous motions. She objected poorly. She let Roger Harding, Marcus's attorney, run circles around her. She filed a motion demanding the return of Elena's emotional support cat, a cat that had been dead for 15 years. Harding spent an entire week and an estimated $50,000 of Marcus's money to produce a death certificate. I want the house, Sarah would demand in depositions. It's outside the prenup, Harding would roar. My client decorated it sweat equity. Marcus was lapping it up. He was winning so hard. Grind her into dust, he'd told Harding over a celebratory steak dinner. During this time, Elena met with Blackwood only once. It was not on the yacht. That was too risky. It was in a private wing of the LACMA in front of a Francis Bacon. a screaming pope trapped in a glass box. "He's enjoying it," Elena said, her voice flat. "He loves watching me beg." "Of course," Blackwood said, his eyes on the painting. "Men like Marcus don't just want to win. They want their opponent to know they've lost. It's a weakness." He gestured to the painting. "He thinks he's in a soundproof box, but the whole world is watching. Arrogance is a fatal flaw, Elena. It makes you loud when you should be silent. It makes you think a bar fight is a war. He doesn't realize he's already in his cage." His words were not comforting. Not. They were cold. He was not her savior. He was her mentor in a new cold world. "The performance is almost over." The day of the final court date arrived. Elena stood in the penthouse looking at her costume, the drab gray suit, the sensible low-heeled shoes. Sarah Jenkins was by the door holding a briefcase. "You're ready." Elena looked at her reflection. A mousy, defeated, broken woman looked back. "He's going to smirk," Elena said. "I know. He's going to pat my shoulder or something." "He will," Sarah said, "and you will let him. You will be the perfect broken bird. You will look at the floor. You will let him have his victory, because you and I know what he doesn't." Sarah checked her watch. It was 8:00 a.m. The court hearing was at 9:00 a.m. "As of right now," Sarah said, "our real case, the whistleblower report authenticated by the Icarus Lyra data you secured, was electronically filed with the SEC and the IRS. The warrants are drafted. The agents are briefed. The moment that gavel hits, the real judge's order goes live." Elena took a deep breath. The air in the penthouse felt different. She was no longer a victim. She was no longer an actress. She was a soldier walking into the final battle. "Let's go lose a battle," Elena said. The morning after his victory, Marcus woke to a sound that was not part of his manicured, soundproofed world. It was a sharp, insistent official rapping at his front door. It cut through the thick whiskey and champagne fog in his head. It was 8:01 a.m. "Ugh, baby, make it stop," Candy's voice mumbled from beneath his $10,000 fret sheets. Marcus stumbled out of bed, grabbing a silk robe. He was annoyed, not alarmed. He was the king. Who would dare? He ripped open the massive custom-built door, ready to yell at a gardener or a delivery man. He froze. 6 men and 2 women, all in dark blue windbreakers with SEC and IRS emblazoned in stark yellow letters, were standing on his doorstep. Their faces were uniformly bored, unimpressed, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Marcus Thorne," the lead agent, a man named Davies, said. His voice was flat. "Who's asking?" Marcus grumbled, his mind still sluggish. Agent Davies didn't smile. He produced a warrant, holding it up like a crucifix to a vampire. "Mr. Thorne, you are the subject of a federal investigation into securities fraud, wire fraud, and tax evasion. We have a warrant to seize this property and all assets within as proceeds of a criminal enterprise." The words didn't compute. "Seize you can't. This is a mistake. My ex-wife, she's just bitter. She's lying." "We're not here about your divorce, sir," Davies said, pushing past him. The entire team flowed into the house like water through a breach. "We're here about Project Lyra." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. "We're here about the Vandermeer accounts," another agent already in the living room called out. "We're here about account 739B in the Cayman Islands." Davies continued, his eyes scanning the foyer. Marcus's knees buckled. Account 739B. No one knew that name. Not Harding. Not his partners. Not even Candy. Only Elena. A high-pitched shriek came from the bedroom. Candy, confronted by a stern-faced female IRS agent, was scrambling for a bathrobe. Her fake, shocked, real terror face a grotesque mask. "You can't do this. I won this house," Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with a sudden sharp panic. "It's mine. The court. The judge said, you won an asset purchased with laundered funds, Mr. Thorne." Agent Davies said, not even looking at him. He was pointing at the large abstract painting in the hall, one of Elena's favorites. "Tag the suitor. We're taking that too." "That's mine." "It's evidence, sir. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal effects. Your wallet, your keys, your phone. That's it." Davies paused, then delivered the final casual execution. "And sir, you'll want to leave the Aston Martin. We're taking that too." He was escorted out. In his silk robe and slippers, he was forced to stand in his own driveway, the California sun just beginning to burn as his neighbors watched. He watched as they put his art, his furniture, his life into trucks. He watched Candy, now fully dressed and crying hysterically, get put into a taxi. He was a king. Now he was a spectacle. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a sterile $20 an hour rental office with peeling paint and the smell of stale coffee. The 48 hours in between had been a blur of concrete and fluorescent lights, a holding cell that smelled of bleach and despair, the one phone call. The humiliation of discovering every one of his credit cards was declined. His friends were no longer taking his calls. Roger Harding had officially recused himself, citing a fundamental conflict of interest. He'd only made bail by signing the title of his Patek Philippe watch, the one Candy had given him for his birthday, over to a bail bondsman who looked at him with pity. His new criminal lawyer, a man named Glass, who charged $2,000 an hour and looked like he hadn't won a case since the 90s, had just left. The news was bad. It was apocalyptically bad. "The case they have," Glass had said, rubbing his tired eyes. "It's not a case, Marcus. It's a confession. They have everything. Server logs, encrypted emails, the wire transfer codes from Icarus to Lyra, and the final hop to the Caymans. Whoever this whistleblower is, they didn't just give the Fed smoke. They gave them the charred smoking building, the blueprints, and the receipt for the gasoline. And," Glass had added, "they threw in a motive. They have correspondence detailing your intent to divert funds for a new life with a Ms. C. Alvarez. It paints a very clear picture for the jury, and it's not a good one." Now Marcus was alone. His phone buzzed. It was a news alert from a financial journal he was still subscribed to. He almost ignored it. He clicked. "For immediate release, Vandermeer Collection partners with Metropolitan Museum of Art for new exhibit." He scoffed. Old money, old news. He was about to delete it when he saw the subheadline. "The ambitious new exhibit, The Hidden Hand Masterpieces of Provenance, will be guest curated by noted art historian Elena Hayes. The exhibition and a new acquisitions fund are being sponsored by a $100 million grant from the Blackwood Foundation." The phone almost slipped from his numb fingers. There was a photo. It was Elena. But it wasn't his Elena. It wasn't the defeated wife in the drab gray suit looking at the floor. It wasn't the mousy, bookish girl he'd married. This was a different woman. A new woman. She was standing on the iconic steps of the Met, flanked on one side by Beatrix Vandermeer and on the other by Julian Alistair Blackwood. She was wearing a sharp dark blue Armani suit that probably cost more than his lawyer. Her hair was cut in a sleek professional bob. Her eyes, looking directly into the camera, were not stormy. They were clear, cold, and utterly in command. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They slammed into him like an avalanche. Guest curated by noted art historian. His little hobby. Beatrix Vandermeer. The connection she made. The deal she charmed. The Blackwood Foundation. The man on the yacht. The cold, thin smile. Blackwood wasn't her lover. He was her patron, her sponsor. He was the Renaissance prince, and she was his master artisan of revenge. He finally understood. The divorce, the fight over the house, her pathetic begging. It was all theater. A grand, spectacular performance to establish her as a victim, not a co-conspirator. She wasn't trying to win the divorce. She was just running out the clock until the real war began. She had used her weakness, her little hobby, Her knowledge of art and provenance, her quiet, meticulous mind, and she had systematically and surgically dismantled his entire life. She hadn't just left him. She had erased him. Blackwood hadn't saved a damsel in distress. He had funded an avenging angel. Marcus Thorne looked at his reflection in the dark, silent screen of his phone. The smirk he'd worn just 48 hours ago seemed like a cruel, distant joke. He had played his game. He had won. He was the victor. But he never realized she and her billionaire mentor were playing a far bigger, far more ruthless game all along. The exhibit's title flashed in his mind, The Hidden Hand. It was her. And in her game, he wasn't just the loser. He wasn't the opposing king. He was the trophy. He was the masterpiece of provenance she had just hung on her wall. In the end, Marcus Thorne learned a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the person you think you've beaten. He was so busy celebrating his win that he never saw the real defeat coming. Elena didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed her life, her career, and her power, all by letting him think he was the winner. The biggest twists in life aren't the ones you see coming. They're the ones that have been planned meticulously in the shadows. What did you think of Elena's long game? Was it brilliant, or was it cold-blooded? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of epic revenge and shocking twists, make sure to hit that like button. It tells the algorithm you have great taste. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder that the game isn't over until the real winner is revealed. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel and ring that bell. We have so many more stories like this to tell, and you don't want to miss a single dramatic moment.
The flash of 1,000 cameras can build a king or expose a fraud. For tech mogul Jasper Vaughan, tonight was supposed to be his coronation. On the glittering red carpet of the Met Gala, he stood with his new younger lover on his arm, the world at his feet. He had everything, the money, the fame, the woman. But what he didn't know was that across the city, the past he so carelessly buried was about to make a spectacular landing. The woman he'd left with nothing was about to arrive with everything, stepping off a billionaire's private jet and into the spotlight, ready to change the narrative forever. The air on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was electric, a heady cocktail of expensive perfume champagne and raw ambition. It was the first Monday in May, and the universe of the elite had converged. Jasper Vaughan, CEO of the tech behemoth Nexus Dynamics, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. This was his Colosseum. Every camera flash was a validation, every fawning reporter a subject in his kingdom. On his arm, Sienna Monroe clung to him like Kucha ivy. She was 23, a supernova of Instagram fame, whose face was a perfect symmetrical mask of modern beauty. She wore a barely there diamond-encrusted gown by Mugler that was designed less for modesty and more for trending on Twitter. Her smile was blinding, but her eyes, whenever they weren't locked on a camera lens, held a flicker of deep-seated insecurity. She was his living trophy, a testament to his power to acquire the most beautiful things. Jasper, over here, a question for Vogue. Jasper turned his own smile, practiced and predator-sharp. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, the fabric so dark it seemed to absorb the light around him. "Anything for you, Anna," he quipped, though the famous editor was nowhere near this particular scrum. It was a power play, a name drop to remind everyone of the circles he now moved in. "Sienna, you look breathtaking." "Who are you wearing?" a reporter from E! News shouted. "Mugler," she purred into the microphone, her voice a practiced, breathy whisper. "And my heart, of course, belongs to Jasper." Jasper squeezed her hand, a proprietary gesture. He loved this, the performance of it all. The world saw him as a visionary, a self-made showman who had clawed his way from a garage in Palo Alto to the pinnacle of global finance. They didn't see the wreckage he'd left behind. They didn't see the woman who had co-founded his dream in a cramped apartment, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared belief in the future. They didn't see Ariella, Just the thought of her name was like a ghost at the feast. Ariella Vaughan, his wife of 12 years, the woman who knew the original code of his first successful app because she'd helped write it. The woman who'd mortgaged her inheritance, a modest but meaningful sum from her late parents, to fund his first server rack. The woman who had named Nexus Dynamics at their kitchen table, sketching the logo on a napkin while he'd been panicking about payroll. He had cut her out as surgically as a surgeon removes a benign tumor that he simply no longer finds attractive. The divorce had been brutal, swift, and silent. He'd used the best lawyers money could buy, a team from Skadden Arps who had buried her in paperwork and non-disclosure agreements that gagged her for life. She had walked away with a settlement that was, for a man of his stature, insulting. A one-time payment that would allow her to live comfortably, but never to challenge him. The NDAs ensured she could never claim her intellectual property, never speak of her contributions, never tarnish the carefully constructed myth of Jasper Vaughan, the lone genius. He'd told her it was for her own good. "You wouldn't be happy in this world, Elle," he'd said, his voice laced with a cruel pity. "It's all so shallow. You're too real for it." And it was the ultimate gaslighting, framing his betrayal as an act of kindness. Jasper, there are rumors of a new acquisition. A journalist from the Wall Street Journal pressed, pulling him back to the present. "Are you looking to absorb the European tech firm, Ethelred?" Jasper's smile tightened. This was a sensitive topic. The Ethelred deal was his magnum opus, the final jewel in his corporate crown. "We're always exploring opportunities for growth. Nexus is about the future," he said, the perfect corporate non-answer. Sienna, bored with the business talk, tugged at his arm. "Darling, let's go inside. I'm dying for a glass of champagne." As he turned to lead her up the grand staircase, a strange shift occurred in the atmosphere. It was subtle at first, a murmur that rippled through the press line. A few photographers lowered their cameras, earpieces crackled, heads began to turn away from the museum steps and towards the street. "What's going on?" Sienna asked, her voice tinged with annoyance. Their spotlight was being stolen. Jasper followed their gaze. A motorcade of black Cadillac Escalades, the kind reserved for heads of state or the truly powerful, was pulling up, bypassing the designated drop-off zone and gliding to a halt directly in front of the red carpet's entrance. This was a breach of protocol, an audacious power move that even he wouldn't dare attempt. The lead security guard on the carpet, a man named Frank, who had seen it all, spoke into his wrist. "Whose convoy is this? They're not on the list." A collective hush fell over the crowd. The doors of the lead Escalade opened, but it wasn't a celebrity who stepped out. It was a team of security, clad in sharp, understated suits, who moved with an eerie, coordinated efficiency. They fanned out, creating a secure perimeter. Then the rear door of the third vehicle opened. A different kind of silence descended. It was a silence of shock and awe. The photographers, who had momentarily paused, suddenly went into a frenzy. The flashes became a single blinding strobe, a violent, percussive roar of light. The focus of the entire Met Gala, the epicenter of global media, had shifted in an instant. From the opulent darkness of the car, a single, elegant heel emerged. It was a Christian Louboutin, its red sole like a drop of blood against the asphalt. Then a leg, then the silhouette of a woman in a gown of deep emerald silk, a custom creation by Schiaparelli that was both a work of art and a suit of armor. Jasper's blood ran cold. He knew that posture. He knew that quiet, unshakable grace. It couldn't be. As she straightened to her full height, the light caught her face. Her mousy brown hair, which he'd always criticized, was now a rich, warm auburn, styled in elegant, cascading waves. Her face, once etched with the stress of supporting his dreams, was now serene and confident. She wore a necklace of Colombian emeralds and diamonds that probably cost more than the settlement he'd given her. It was Ariella. His Ariella. But she wasn't his anymore. She looked like a queen. He stood frozen halfway up the stairs. Sienna's grip on his arm suddenly feeling like a lead weight. The reporters were screaming her name now, their voices a chaotic mix of confusion and excitement. Ariella. Ariella Vaughan. Who are you with? Who are you wearing? Ariella didn't look at them. Her gaze was fixed forward, calm and deliberate. She turned back to the car and extended a hand, and the man who took it, stepping out to join her, was the reason the protocol had been broken. It was Alistair Finch, the reclusive, enigmatic billionaire, the man whose net worth made Jasper's look like pocket change. Alistair Finch, the founder of the Finch Foundation, a titan of industry in renewable energy and aerospace, a man who hadn't walked a red carpet in over a decade. He was the media's white whale, intensely private and impossibly powerful. He stood beside Ariella, his hand protectively on the small of her back. He wasn't smiling for the cameras. He was smiling at her. The Wall Street Journal reporter, who had been grilling Jasper just moments before, now sprinted down the stairs, microphone in hand, his face alight with the biggest scoop of his career. Mr. Finch, what an unexpected surprise. What brings you to the gala tonight? Alistair's voice when he spoke was calm and clear, cutting through the din. My partner, he said, his eyes still on Ariella, expressed an interest in the exhibit, and what Ariella wants, she gets. Partner. The word echoed across the plaza, amplified by 100 hot mics. It was a declaration. Jasper felt the blood drain from his face. His carefully constructed world was tilting on its axis. On the grandest stage imaginable, his discarded past had just upstaged his triumphant present. And she hadn't arrived in a taxi. She'd arrived with the one man in the world he could never compete with. Sienna finally processed what was happening. Is that your ex-wife? She whispered, her voice a mix of disbelief and horror. Jasper couldn't answer. He could only watch as Ariella and Alistair began to walk towards the steps, parting the sea of reporters, like Moses parting the Red Sea. The cameras that had adored him seconds ago were now turned away completely, ignoring him and Sienna. They were old news. The real story was walking towards them. And as Ariella reached the bottom of the staircase, her eyes cool and composed, finally met his. There was no anger in them, no sadness. There was something far worse, indifference. It was the look of a woman who had not only moved on, but had ascended to a stratosphere he couldn't even fathom. The flashbulbs continued to pop, capturing the tableau for eternity. Jasper Vaughan, the new king, standing halfway to the top, forgotten, and Ariella, the woman he had erased, standing at the bottom, poised to begin her ascent with a true emperor by her side. The world seemed to slow down, contracting to the space between the bottom and top of the grand staircase. For Jasper, it was a dizzying, nauseating vertigo. He and Sienna were frozen in place, suddenly transformed from the night's main event into awkward, overdressed statues. The roar of the press was a physical force, every shouted question for Ariella, a hammer blow to his ego. Ariella, your necklace, is that from the Finch private collection? Mr. Finch, does this mean you're officially back in the public eye? Ariella, a comment for the Times. How does it feel to be back? Back! Jasper thought, a bitter laugh almost escaping his lips. She was never here in the first place. This wasn't her world. He had made sure of that. He had built the walls of this gilded cage himself, and he had been the one to lock her out. Ariella moved with a liquid grace he barely recognized. The woman he remembered would have been flustered by this level of attention, her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze averted. This woman held her head high, her posture radiating a quiet power that was more commanding than any shout. The Schiaparelli gown, in a shade of emerald so deep it was almost black in the shadows, was a statement. It wasn't just a dress, it was armor, and its severe, elegant lines made Sienna's glittering see-through number looked cheap and desperate by comparison. Alistair Finch was the perfect counterpoint to her newfound radiance. Dressed in a simple, impeccably tailored Brioni suit, he wore his power with an ease Jasper could only feign. He didn't crave the cameras, he tolerated them. His focus was entirely on Ariella. He would lean in to whisper something in her ear, and a small, genuine smile would touch her lips. The intimacy of the gesture performed on the world's most public stage was more potent than any passionate kiss. It spoke of a deep, unshakable connection. As they reached the base of the stairs, a path cleared for them. The security team moved with quiet precision. Jasper watched his jaw clenched as Anna Wintour herself, who had not deigned to greet him, descended the first few steps to personally welcome them. She embraced Ariella with a warmth that was famously reserved for only a chosen few. "Ariella, my dear," Anna's voice was crisp and clear. "You look magnificent. Alistair, you old rogue, I knew I could count on you to shake things up." "Only for the right reasons, Anna," Alistair replied smoothly, his hand never leaving Ariella's back. It was then that Ariella's gaze lifted and swept past the fawning fashion icon, past the throng of reporters, and settled directly on Jasper. For a fraction of a second, the universe held its breath. The cool indifference he had seen from a distance was now up close, and it was infinitely more chilling. Her eyes, which had once looked at him with adoration, with hope, with heartbreak, now held nothing but a calm, placid emptiness. It was as if she were looking at a stranger, a piece of furniture that was inconveniently blocking her path. Sienna, recovering her wits, tried to reclaim the narrative. She tightened her grip on Jasper's arm and hissed, "Smile, Jasper. They're watching. Don't let her see she's getting to you." He forced the corners of his mouth to lift, but the expression felt like a death mask. Ariella and Alistair began their ascent. They had to walk past them. The four of them were on a collision course on the crimson-carpeted steps. The photographers held their breath, their fingers poised on the shutters, sensing the impending drama. Ariella's eyes flickered from Jasper to Sienna. She took in the younger woman's desperate beauty, the garish dress, the possessive hand on her ex-husband's arm. There was no judgment in her look, only a fleeting, almost clinical assessment. As they drew level, Jasper couldn't stop himself. The words tore out of him, a low, venomous whisper, meant only for her. "What is this, Elle? What kind of game are you playing?" Ariella paused. Her movement so slight it was almost imperceptible. She turned her head, her emerald earrings catching the light. Alistair stopped with her, his expression unreadable, but his presence a silent, immovable wall. She looked at Jasper, and for the first time that night, she spoke to him. Her voice was not the one he remembered, the one that would tremble during arguments or soften with affection. This voice was level cool and carried a resonance of newfound authority. "Game," she repeated the word, tasting foreign on her tongue. "There's no game, Jasper." She then looked him up and down, a slow, deliberate appraisal that mirrored his own countless dismissive glances from the past. "This is just my life." It was a devastatingly simple sentence, yet it landed with the force of a physical blow. It reframed everything. His grand life, the one he had flaunted, was her game. Her new reality, calm and powerful, was simply her life. She didn't wait for a response. She gave a minute, almost imperceptible nod, a dismissal, and then turned to continue up the stairs. But Sienna, fueled by jealousy and the humiliation of being ignored, couldn't let it go. "He made you, you know." She spat, her voice a shrill whisper that was just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You were nothing before him." Alistair Finch, who had remained silent, finally moved. He didn't look at Sienna. He didn't raise his voice. He simply shifted his body slightly, a subtle but unmistakable blocking maneuver, and looked down at Jasper. His eyes were like chips of ice. "I believe," Alistair said, his voice a low baritone that cut through the noise. "You and your guest are creating a scene. It would be wise to remember where you are, and more importantly, who you're speaking to. The implicit threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't about physical violence. It was about something far more terrifying to a man like Jasper, the complete and utter annihilation of his social and financial standing. Alistair Finch could crush Nexus Dynamics with a single phone call, blacklist him from every circle of power, and reduce his empire to dust. Jasper felt a tremor of genuine fear. He gave Sienna's arm a sharp tug, a silent command to shut up. Ariella was already several steps ahead, seemingly unfazed. She paused at the top of the landing framed by the grand entrance to the museum. She looked back, not at Jasper, but out over the sea of flashing lights, the city glittering behind her. She took a deep breath, as if savoring the air of a world that was finally her own. Then she and Alistair disappeared inside, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. The spell was broken. The press, having captured their money shots, began to disperse or follow the real story inside. Jasper and Sienna were left alone on the stairs, the focus of the world having moved on as quickly as it had arrived. The energy, the adoration, the power, it had all evaporated. What was that? Sienna stammered, her fake confidence shattered. Who does she think she is? Jasper finally looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time he didn't see a trophy. He saw a liability. He saw a shallow, foolish girl who had just provoked one of the most powerful men on the planet. He saw a pale imitation of the substance he had thrown away. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice flat and dead, "and don't speak to anyone." He left her there and stalked towards the entrance, his mind racing. This wasn't a random encounter. This was a calculated move. The location, the timing, the choice of escort, it was all designed for maximum impact. Ariella, the quiet, compliant, real woman he had patronized, had just executed a public relations coup that would make the most seasoned Hollywood publicist weep with envy. But how? How did she get to Alistair Finch? The man was a ghost. He didn't do partners. He'd do partners. And why now? As he stepped into the museum's great hall, the enormity of what had just happened began to sink in. He had come here tonight to celebrate his victory, to put the final stamp on his new life. Instead, the prologue to a whole new war had just been written. And this time, he had a terrifying feeling he was no longer the main character. He was the villain. And every villain, sooner or later, faces a reckoning. The inside of the Met was a swirling vortex of high society. The din of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet filled the air. But for Jasper, it was all background noise. He moved through the throngs of celebrities and power brokers, like a phantom, his mind replaying the scene on the steps in a torturous loop. Everywhere he looked, he saw people huddled together, whispering. He caught snippets of conversation. "Did you see Ariella Vaughan?" "With Alistair Finch, can you believe it?" The look on Jasper's face. That Schiaparelli gown was a declaration of war. He was the subject of gossip, of pity. It was intolerable. He found Sienna near the champagne fountain, already on her second glass, looking sullen and out of her depth. "I can't believe her," Sienna muttered, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of Ariella. "She planned that. She did it just to humiliate you, to humiliate us." "Stop talking," Jasper commanded, grabbing a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downing it in 2 gulps. His mind was a maelstrom of rage and confusion. Sienna's simplistic analysis was both right and wrong. Of course, it was planned, but the Ariella he knew wouldn't have concocted such a scheme for petty revenge. There had to be something more, a deeper strategy at play that he couldn't yet see. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen was a cascade of notifications. News alerts from Bloomberg, the New York Times, Forbes. His own PR head, a bulldog of a man named Marcus, was calling him repeatedly. He ignored it. He knew what they would say. He swiped to a browser and typed in Ariella's name. The results, which hours ago would have shown a few old forgotten photos of them together and a link to a defunct pottery blog she once kept, were now exploding. Ariella Vaughan was trending worldwide. Articles were already being written. Speculative pieces titled "The Phoenix, Who is Ariella Vaughan? Alistair Finch's Mystery Woman Revealed." And most damningly, the ultimate power move as Tech CO debuts new love his ex-wife arrives with a titan. He felt a wave of impotent fury. He had spent millions curating his public image, crafting a narrative of solitary genius. In the space of 10 minutes, Ariella had hijacked it, rewritten it, and made him a secondary character in his own life story. He needed to understand. How did she, with her limited resources and non-existent connections, get into the orbit of Alistair Finch? The man was more myth than reality, living on a private island in the Caribbean and communicating with the world through his foundation. He didn't attend parties. He didn't date. He certainly didn't escort jilted ex-wives to the Met Gala. A memory surfaced unbidden. It was from about 6 months ago, during the final ugly stages of their divorce proceedings. His legal team was presenting him with the NDA they had drafted for Ariella. "It's ironclad Mr. Vaughan," the lead attorney, a slick corporate shark named Peterson, had assured him. "She can't discuss the company's formation, her involvement. The initial seed money, nothing. Her name is effectively erased from the corporate history of Nexus Dynamics." "Good," Jasper had said. "She'll sign it." "She's fighting it on one small point," Peterson had replied, looking down at his notes. "It's odd. She's not asking for more money. She's insisting on a clause that releases her from any non-compete obligations specifically related to European tech firms, particularly those specializing in sustainable data solutions." Jasper had scoffed. "Let her have it. What's she going to do? Start a rival company from her one-bedroom apartment. Give her the crumb. It will make her feel like she won something." And he saw it now. It wasn't a crumb. It was a key. Ethelred, the European firm he was trying to acquire, their specialty, sustainable data solutions, the very company the WSJ reporter had asked him about. The connection clicked into place with the force of a thunderclap. This wasn't about the Met Gala. This wasn't about Sienna. This was about Ethelred. He grabbed Sienna's arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "We're leaving." "But we just got here," she protested, whining. "I wanted to get a photo with Zendaya." "Now!" he snarled, dragging her towards a side exit, ignoring the curious stares. The moment they were in the back of his Maybach, he was on the phone with Marcus. "What the hell is going on, Jasper?" Marcus's voice was frantic. "My phone has melted. The board is calling. The narrative is out of control. They're painting you as the villain who threw away a diamond and picked up a piece of glass." "Forget the narrative," Jasper barked, his voice raw. "I need you to dig. I need to know everything about Ariella Vaughan and Alistair Finch. Not the public crap. I need to know when they met, how they met, what their connection is. And I need to know Finch's position on my Ethelred acquisition. Now." He hung up, his heart pounding against his ribs. The dots were connecting into a terrifying picture. Meanwhile, in a quiet private suite overlooking the museum's sculpture garden, Ariella Vaughan took a sip of water, her hand perfectly steady. Alistair sat opposite her in a plush armchair, observing her with a warm, approving gaze. The chaos of the red carpet felt a world away. "You were magnificent," Alistair said, his voice a low, calming rumble. Poised, powerful. You didn't flinch. A small, wry smile touched Ariella's lips. "I was terrified, Alistair. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest." "I would never have known," he said. "Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. You were very courageous tonight." Her journey to this moment had not been one of revenge, but of survival. After the divorce, she had been adrift in a sea of grief and betrayal. The man she had loved and built a life with had discarded her as if she were a piece of obsolete hardware. The settlement, while enough to live on, was a constant, insulting reminder of how little he valued her contributions. For months, she had done nothing, paralyzed by the sheer injustice of it all. The NDA she had been forced to sign was a gag, silencing her history, erasing her truth. The turning point had come late one night. She was staring at the business section of a newspaper at a glowing profile of Jasper that described him as a lone visionary. The rage that had been simmering for months finally boiled over. But it wasn't a destructive rage. It was clarifying. It burned away the grief and left behind a cold, hard resolve. He had taken her past, so she would have to build a new future. She remembered the clause she had fought for in the divorce, the one Jasper had dismissed so arrogantly. She had insisted on it because she had been the one to first identify Ethelred as a potential acquisition target for Nexus years ago. She was the one who saw the genius in their sustainable data cooling technology, a field Jasper had deemed a niche, non-profitable distraction. She knew their value better than anyone. She couldn't compete with Nexus, but perhaps she could consult for its competition. Using the last of her savings, she flew to Berlin, the headquarters of Ethelred. She didn't ask for a job. She asked for one meeting offering a free 1-hour consultation on how to counter a hostile takeover from an American tech giant like Nexus Dynamics. She knew Jasper's playbook because she had helped him write it. The German executives, initially skeptical of this unknown American woman, were stunned by her incisive analysis, her intimate knowledge of Nexus's operational weaknesses, and Jasper's psychological blind spots. They offered her a consulting contract on the spot. It was during her work with Ethelred that she came onto Alistair Finch's radar. Finch's foundation was a major silent investor in Ethelred, drawn to its green technology. When he heard that a mysterious consultant named Ariella Vaughan was the mastermind behind Ethelred's brilliant defense strategy against the Nexus takeover bid, he had been intrigued. He summoned her to a meeting. He had expected a hardened corporate mercenary. Instead, he found a brilliant, dignified woman with a quiet fire in her eyes. He wasn't interested in the gossip of her past, but in the clarity of her vision for the future. They met to talk about business, but they ended up talking about everything. Art, philosophy, the ethics of technology, the burden of immense success. He saw in her a partner, not in a romantic sense, at least not at first, but an intellectual and spiritual equal. He saw the architect that Jasper had tried to erase. When he learned the full story of her involvement with Nexus and the gag order she was under, his intrigue turned to a cold fury. Alistair Finch was a man who detested bullies and credit thieves. "He didn't just divorce you, Ariella," he had said to her one evening at his estate. "He committed an act of historical erasure. He stole your legacy." "The NDA is unbreakable," she had replied, a familiar wave of hopelessness washing over her. "I can never tell my story." Alistair had leaned forward, his eyes intense. "An NDA prevents you from speaking. It does not prevent you from being. You don't have to tell the world you're brilliant, Ariella. You just have to show them. You don't have to talk about your power. You just have to demonstrate it. We will not break the NDA. We will make it irrelevant." And so the plan was born. It was not about revenge. It was about reclamation. The Met Gala was not the endgame. It was the opening move. It was a signal to the world, and specifically to Jasper, that Ariella was no longer a ghost. She was a player, and she was now backed by a king. "Jasper knows now," Ariella said, her gaze distant. "He's not stupid. He'll have connected me to Ethelred. He'll be digging." "Let him dig," Alistair said, with a calm smile. "He'll only find what I want him to find, that you are the lead strategic consultant for Ethelred's defense, and that my foundation is increasing its stake in the company with you being appointed to the board of directors next month." Ariella took a deep breath. Board of Directors. The title felt immense, terrifying, and exhilarating. "He will fight dirty," she warned. "He will come after me. He'll use the press. He'll try to smear my name. I know, Alistair said. His expression grew serious. And that is the next phase of our strategy. We've shown them your power. Now we will show them your character. Let him sling his mud. We will be ready. He stood up and offered her his hand. But for tonight, let's not talk about Jasper. Let's go and look at some art. Let's allow the world to see you simply enjoying your life. There is no greater victory than that. She took his hand, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. The war was far from over, but for the first time she was on solid ground with an ally who didn't just see her as a support system, but as the architect herself. And together, they were about to draw up the blueprints for Jasper Vaughan's downfall. The fallout from the Met Gala was swift and brutal. Jasper Vaughan, a man accustomed to controlling the narrative, found himself caught in a tsunami of public opinion he could not command. His PR team worked around the clock, but it was like trying to patch a dam with chewing gum. The image of Ariella poised and powerful next to the enigmatic Alistair Finch was seared into the public consciousness. It was a story of rebirth and empowerment, and in that story, Jasper was cast as the villain. His first move was a calculated leak to a friendly gossip columnist at page 6. The story planted by Marcus painted Ariella as a bitter ex-wife who had seduced an aging, reclusive billionaire in a desperate act of revenge. It hinted at mental instability, at an obsession with her ex-husband's success. It was a classic, misogynistic smear designed to discredit her and reframe her appearance as pathetic rather than powerful. The article ran, but it didn't have the intended effect. Instead of swaying public opinion, it backfired. Feminist commentators and online forums immediately decried it as a transparent attempt to silence a woman who had clearly leveled up. Social media exploded with hashtags like #TeamAriella and #Vindicated People saw the story for what it was, the desperate flailing of a man whose ego had been wounded. Sienna, meanwhile, was becoming a significant problem. The public humiliation had cracked her carefully constructed facade. She vacillated between fits of rage, accusing Jasper of not protecting her, and bouts of weeping insecurity. Her social media, once a stream of glamorous selfies and sponsored posts, became erratic. She posted and deleted cryptic quotes about loyalty and betrayal. She was a loose cannon, and Jasper, whose life was built on meticulous control, found her emotional chaos unbearable. "You need to get a grip," he snapped at her one morning in his sterile glass-walled penthouse overlooking Central Park. She was crying because a designer had indefinitely postponed a collaboration with her, a clear sign that her brand was now tainted by his bad press. "A grip!" she shrieked, her mascara running. "My career is being ruined because your ex-wife decided to play Cinderfucking-Rella. And what are you doing about it? Nothing. That stupid article made things worse." The article was a strategic misstep, he conceded through gritted teeth. "We're moving on to phase 2. Phase 2 was far more ruthless. Unable to win in the court of public opinion, Jasper decided to attack where he felt Ariella was truly vulnerable, her professional credibility and the Ethelred deal. He called an emergency meeting with his M&A team. "Forget the charm offensive," he ordered, pacing his boardroom. The skyline of New York was his backdrop, but it offered no comfort. "We're going hostile. I want to initiate a proxy battle for Ethelred. We'll go directly to their shareholders, and I want our opposition research team to dig into every single aspect of their board and key consultants, specifically Ariella Vaughan." He intended to find a weakness, a mistake, a skeleton in her closet, anything he could use to disqualify her, to paint her as incompetent or corrupt. He wanted to prove to Alistair Finch that he had backed the wrong horse. He wanted to destroy the foundation of her new life. His researchers worked for weeks, but they came up empty. Ariella's life had been utterly scandal-free. Her work for Ethelred was by all accounts exemplary. The company's stock had risen steadily since her involvement. She was a ghost in terms of leverage. There's nothing, Jasper, his head of research reported, looking nervous. She has no debt, no shady dealings, no disgruntled former colleagues. Her record is pristine. It's almost unnatural. The pristine nature of her past only fueled Jasper's paranoia. No one was that clean. He became obsessed, spending late nights personally sifting through documents, old emails, anything that might provide a clue. His work at Nexus began to suffer. He was distracted, volatile, his judgment clouded by his personal vendetta. The proxy battle for Ethelred was becoming uglier and more expensive by the day. Jasper's team released statements questioning Ethelred's leadership and financial stability. But Ethelred, guided by Ariella's strategy and backed by Finch's immense capital, countered every move with calm factual rebuttals. They portrayed Nexus Dynamics as a corporate raider trying to crush a smaller, innovative European competitor. The European press, and even some American financial journalists, began to side with Ethelred. Jasper was losing, and as he lost, he grew more desperate. In Berlin, Ariella watched Jasper's machinations with a sense of grim predictability. She and Alistair had anticipated this. "He's playing his old game," she told Alistair during one of their daily video conferences. She was in Ethelred's sleek, minimalist boardroom, while he was in his study, half a world away. When he can't win on merit, he tries to destroy his opponent's character. And in doing so, he is revealing his own. Alistair replied, his voice calm. He is over-leveraging Nexus. His board must be getting nervous. His obsession is making him reckless. Let him continue. But Ariella knew there was another angle Jasper would eventually try, a more personal one. The call came one afternoon. It was from her younger sister Chloe, a gentle soul who worked as an elementary school teacher in Ohio. Chloe was crying. "Ellie, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know what to do." "Chloe, slow down. What is it? What happened?" Ariella asked, her blood turning to ice. "A man came to see me," Chloe explained between sobs. "A lawyer, I think. He said he represented Jasper. He started asking questions about Mum and Dad's inheritance. The money you used to, you know." Ariella felt the air leave her lungs. The seed money, the small inheritance from her parents that she had given Jasper to start his company all those years ago. It had been a gift given out of love and belief. There was no paperwork, no loan agreement, just a wife's faith in her husband. "He was asking if there were any documents," Chloe continued, "if you ever called it a loan. He said if you were trying to claim any stake in Nexus based on that money, Jasper would sue you for fraud. He said he would sue me for conspiring with you. He mentioned my teaching license, Ellie. He threatened my job." The sheer, unadulterated cruelty of it took Ariella's breath away. He wasn't just coming after her. He was threatening her family. He was trying to poison the purest, most selfless act of her life and turn it into a weapon against her. "Listen to me, Chloe," Ariella said, her voice shaking but firm. "You have done nothing wrong. This is a scare tactic. He is a bully and a coward. Do not speak to this man again. If he contacts you, you hang up. Understand?" After calming her sister down, Ariella hung up the phone, and for the first time since the ordeal began, she felt a wave of true, white-hot fury. This crossed a line. This was no longer business. This was personal. She immediately called Alistair. She recounted the conversation, her voice tight with rage. For a long moment there was silence on the other end of the line. When Alistair finally spoke, his voice had lost its customary calm. It was replaced by something cold and hard as steel. "He has made a grave error, Ariella," he said slowly. "He has mistaken our restraint for weakness. He believes this is a game of corporate chess. He has forgotten that in real life, when you threaten a person's family, the rules change." "What do we do?" Ariella asked, her mind racing. "For years, you have honored an agreement that has silenced you and erased your history," Alistair said. That NDA was designed to protect his reputation and his assets, but he has now threatened your family in an attempt to further leverage a company you helped build. In my opinion, that constitutes a material breach of good faith. The agreement was predicated on a quiet separation. This is an act of aggression. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. He's been digging into your past for a weakness. I think it's time we took a closer look at his. Not his personal life, his professional one. Specifically, the origins of Nexus Dynamics. You said the original code was a joint effort, that the business plan was conceived together. Yes, Ariella said quietly. But I have no proof. It was all on old laptops on napkins. It's gone. Is it? Alistair asked, a new dangerous edge to his voice. Jasper is arrogant, but he's also a digital pack rat. He never deletes anything. He sees it all as part of his legend. The original servers, the first lines of code, they're his origin story. He'll have them backed up somewhere in a digital archive he thinks no one can touch. Bullies always keep trophies of their conquests. Alistair continued, I am going to authorize a full-scale digital forensic investigation. We're not hacking him. We are going to legally subpoena the digital archives of Nexus Dynamics as part of the discovery process for the proxy battle. He's accusing Ethelred's consultant you of being unqualified. We will counter that your qualifications are so profound that you were in fact the uncredited co-founder of his own company. We will force him to open his books, his files, his entire digital history. Let's see how the myth of the lone genius holds up under a federal subpoena. Ariella felt a jolt, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the point of no return. He will fight it, she said. And he will lose, Alistair countered, because he has something to hide, and we, my dear Ariella, are about to bring it into the light. He wanted to dig into your past fine. Let's show him what a real archaeological excavation looks like, so. The battle for Ethelred was about to become secondary. The real war, the war for the truth of Nexus Dynamics, was about to begin. And somewhere in a climate-controlled high-security server farm, the ghost on the napkin was waiting to be resurrected. The legal battle over the Ethelred proxy fight transformed into a direct assault on Jasper's history. Alistair's legal team from Quinn Emanuel filed a subpoena demanding access to Nexus Dynamics' earliest digital archives, arguing that Ariella's qualifications, and thus her competence as a consultant for Ethelred, were rooted in her uncredited role as a co-founder. Jasper's lawyers fought back with frantic energy, decrying the move as an invasive fishing expedition designed to steal trade secrets. They filed motion after motion, but their desperation was transparent. He's stalling, Ariella observed to Alistair from their London war room. The more he fights this, the more certain I am that the proof is in there. His resistance is the tell, Alistair agreed. He's bluffing with a bad hand. It's time to call. Alistair's lawyers were relentless, and the judge, a sharp woman named Atherton, saw through the smokescreen. She granted a court-supervised forensic analysis of Nexus's archives, limited to the company's first 2 years. The news sent Jasper into a spiral of fury and paranoia. His carefully constructed past was about to be excavated. He became a ghost haunting his own company, his legendary focus shattered by the dread of what the forensic team might find in the digital tomb of his old hard drives. Weeks of tense silence followed as the experts sifted through terabytes of old data. For Ariella, the waiting was agonizing, but also clarifying. She poured her energy into her work, with Ethelred building her future, while the truth of her past was being unearthed. The breakthrough came on a grey Tuesday afternoon. An urgent call from Alistair's lead lawyer pulled her from a meeting. We found it. The lawyer's voice was electric. It's better than we could have possibly hoped. Ariella sank into a chair, her heart hammering against her ribs. He's an obsessive archivist of his own genius. The lawyer explained, a note of incredulous laughter in his voice. Buried in a backup from a 2010 home PC, we found a scanned file. Jasper was so narcissistic that he actually scanned the napkin, from their old kitchen table. Ariella felt the air leave her lungs. On that flimsy piece of paper, in her own distinctive handwriting, was the flowchart for the app's core interface, and circled at the top, the name she had invented, Nexus. But that's not the knockout punch, the lawyer continued, his voice dropping for dramatic effect. In the same folder, there's a draft of the email he wrote to his first investor. He never sent this version. In it he states, and I am quoting directly, "My partner and I have developed a revolutionary new platform. She is the architectural visionary behind the concept, while I am handling the business development and coding execution." He had written it himself. The unvarnished truth, saved in a moment of candor before his ego rewrote history. He had documented his own lie. "He erased you, Ariella," the lawyer said softly, "and now the evidence of that erasure will be his undoing." The documents were filed under seal, and the effect was seismic. When Jasper's lawyers informed him of the discovery, his world imploded. His legal case was not just compromised, it was annihilated. He was facing perjury charges and a lawsuit from Ariella that the now fraudulent NDA could no longer protect him from. The consequences were immediate. The proxy battle for Ethelred was over. He withdrew the bid in a humiliating public defeat, sending Nexus stock into a freefall. The board, furious at his reckless and costly vendetta, called an emergency meeting. That evening, while Jasper was locked in his office trying to stop the hemorrhaging, Sienna saw the truth. She was tied to a sinking ship, not a king. She quietly packed her jewelry and designer clothes and slipped out of the penthouse, disappearing from his life as silently as she had entered it. When Jasper finally emerged, defeated and broken, the cavernous apartment was silent. He was utterly alone. Across the Atlantic, Ariella stood on a balcony overlooking the London night. Alistair had flown in the moment he'd heard the news and now stood beside her. "It's over," she whispered, the words heavy with the weight of a long and painful journey. "No," Alistair corrected her, gently taking her hand. His presence was a warm, solid anchor in the swirl of events. "It's just beginning. You're free, Ariella. The gag is off. Your history is now yours to claim." She looked at him, her eyes shining in the city lights. The ghost on the napkin hadn't just exposed a lie, it had resurrected her truth. The war for her past was won. Now the campaign for her future could truly begin. The dam of Jasper's lies broke spectacularly. Once the court documents were unsealed, the story of the ghost on the napkin became a global sensation. The irrefutable proof of Ariella's foundational role, the scanned napkin, and the draft email admitting she was the architectural visionary, wasn't just a legal smoking gun. It was a devastating narrative. The reckoning for Jasper Vaughan was swift and total. The emergency board meeting was less a discussion than an execution. Faced with overwhelming evidence of fraud, a collapsed acquisition, and a stock price in freefall, they voted unanimously to oust him as CEO of the company he had stolen. His assets were frozen, shareholder lawsuits piled up, and the CCC launched a formal investigation. His professional world evaporated. His personal world followed suit. Sienna Monroe, seeing her patron's power vanish quietly, packed her designer bags and disappeared, leaving him utterly alone in the wreckage. Jasper became a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered in the boardrooms he once commanded. In stark contrast, Ariella's star ascended. She became a symbol of vindication. The media clamored for interviews, but she refused to engage in the salacious post-mortem of Jasper's career. She was not interested in revenge, only reclamation. She chose a single stage to tell her story, a keynote address at the Women in Tech Global Conference. In front of thousands, she spoke not of her personal pain, but of the creative passion that had once fueled Nexus. She framed her experience as one of many, a story of the countless women whose vital contributions have been systematically erased from the annals of innovation. Then, she delivered her masterstroke. She announced that her monumental settlement from Jasper, which gave her a significant minority stake in the company she co-founded, would be the seed capital for a new venture. For too long, history has been written by those who hold the pen, not those who had the idea. She declared, her voice resonating with quiet authority. That is why I am announcing the formation of the Archimedes Foundation. Its mission is simple: to fund and champion the unsung architects of our future. We will provide the capital and legal support to ensure their legacies are protected and their contributions are never again left as ghosts on a napkin. The ovation was immediate and overwhelming. In the front row, Alistair Finch watched not as a savior, but as a proud partner. He had provided the means for her to fight, but this victory, this transformation from victim to leader, was hers alone. Weeks later, after the final papers were signed, Ariella found herself walking near the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the site of her public re-emergence. The memory felt like a lifetime ago. Her phone rang with an unknown number. She answered. Ariella. The voice was a hoarse, broken version of Jasper's. I saw the news about the foundation. He paused, the silence heavy with all that was unsaid. It was always yours, wasn't it, the name? Nexus. It was the closest he could get to an admission, a final self-serving grasp for absolution. Ariella listened to the sounds of the city around her, a city that was no longer his, but a landscape of her own making. The anger and hurt were gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace. She had already moved on. Yes, it was, she said simply, her voice calm and final. Goodbye, Jasper. She ended the call before he could answer. She didn't need to hear another word. His chapter was finished. Slipping the phone into her pocket, Ariella Vaughan turned away from the museum and walked into the bright, clear afternoon, the sole architect of the brilliant future that lay ahead. And that's the incredible story of how a single moment on a red carpet can trigger an avalanche of truth and justice. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about the spotlight you command, but the integrity you hold when no one is watching. Ariella Vaughan's journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming a history that was stolen from her and using her newfound power to build a better future for others. It shows us that, even when you're silenced, your truth has a way of coming to light. What do you think? Was Ariella's move at the Met Gala a brilliant act of empowerment or a cold, calculated strike? Who was the real villain in this story? Beyond just Jasper. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of epic comebacks and justice served, drop a justice for Ariella in the comments section. And as always, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true life dramas. Thanks for listening.